Hello and welcome to Nollywood Film Club. I'm Mr. C, a Vertical critic. I hope you're doing well. Yes, odd title, as you may see. We are not just discussing one film or two films, we're discussing two films and technically a topic. It's a new, I want to say series, but that would mean that we're definitely going to do more. We'll see. It depends on how much you like it, and you can show how much you like it by rating the podcast. Hint, hint. Um, Leaving a comment wherever are listening on the podcast. Um, yeah, so we just were trying something out. I do explain exactly how the format of this versus is going on, so I don't think I'm going to do that on here. But there are timestamps below in the description, and I'm just going to let you enjoy it. I had fun, and hopefully, hopefully you do too. And I'll just let you enjoy Nollywood Film Club discussing Lionheart versus Living in Bondage. Welcome to Nollywood Film Club. We do discuss usually Nollywood movies every week. Sometimes we do topics. Today is a combination of both. We are going to be discussing, we're going to be doing a versus where we're going to be comparing which one is the better movie between Living in Bondage, Breaking Free, and Lionheart. We will have a few categories. We'll discuss the performances, we'll discuss the story, we'll discuss the production, and then we'll do overall what we think is the better one. So I'm excited for this conversation. Let's see how this goes. All right, Vanessa, do you want to start us off with your feelings as we go into performances? Which movie do you think has the better performances?
Before I start, I would just like to say anarchy rules. I couldn't. Anarchy, no, but literally, anarchy lose because you know what you did. You know what you did with these verses. You actually know what you did with these verses.
I don't know what you're
Performance.
talking about.
Okay, sure. No, wahala. Performances. Hey, good. You gave me homework. I actually woke up this morning, had breakfast, and then I came and I started watching both films. I haven't watched both films in years, and I was shocked at how my taste has changed and how I've grown. Um, I guess let's just do a breakdown of both performances, and then I'll decide. Oh, God, this is me trying to buy time. Um, Nkemo was a standout in Lionheart. So was Kanayo. The late Onyeka Onwenu as well. Kalu Ikeagu definitely gave Sniveling Bastard. Um, Honorable mention. Honorable, I'm sorry, it might seem crazy, but I actually quite liked him in this. Honorable mention to the man, the myth, the legend, Peter Okoye as Arinze. I you cannot laugh. I actually quite liked Peter Okoye in this. Maybe it's because he was playing if Napadimi or Remy on the piano. I don't care. I didn't hate him in this. He didn't. It definitely wasn't as bad as Femi Fernandez. So okay. While in Lionheart, unfortunately, so I guess where I'm going is Eina Ngwe is my favorite performance in Living in Bondage. Sorry. Um, yeah, Eina Ngwe 8. That opening, he literally carried this film with his performance in the opening scene of the film. The look in his eyes as he switched from distraught when he was crying as he was driving to when they got to where he was going to sacrifice his daughter and his eyes changed to resolute. I was like, okay, performance. But the problem is, when you think about it comparatively, how many performances were really good in Living in Bondage versus how many performances were good in Lionheart? Because as much as Living in Bondage gave us our introduction to Joe Elegba, Nick Fury meets Tony Stark meets Bruce Wayne, um, what is his name? Richard Williams. I don't know how somebody has two last names as a first name, as both name. I don't know. See, as much as we got our introduction to that, Ramsey Noah wasn't particularly great in this film. I don't know what I was thinking in 2019 when I thought Jide Kene Swanky God, it's not fair. This is what I mean by I've grown, I've changed. I don't know why I thought that guy. God, I don't hate Jide Kennedy. This is the funny part. I do think he has potential, but I do think his performance was a bit overhyped when the film came out. Hey God, I'm suffering here. Mr. C, you're laughing. You know what you did. So comparatively, based on how many good performances there were in both films, I'm saying this is gonna go to to Lionheart. Okay, I've said it. Bye.
Oh, okay. Our first point on the board goes to Lionheart from Vanessa for performance. That's interesting. It sounded painful going through that.
You
Okay,
know what you
something.
did to me. You know what you did to me.
Oh man, I would suggest the Lionheart and the Living in Bondage spaces as a companion piece to this. Just check how people have grown or whether people have switched. The people who have stayed the same, all of that. Check it out. But
I giving them a
thanks,
homework.
thanks, Vanessa. All right. Eccentric Shazy. Shazy, please tell us, in terms of performances, which film has done it for you? Sh-
Hi everyone. Good evening. Sorry, I have a little bit of sore throat, so you'd pardon me this evening. I sound funny. Um, hmm. I had to rewatch both films again. I mean, I have seen them before, at least twice, but when you said we were going to do a review of both movies, I had to go and rewatch it like again, just to be sure of what I was going to about. I'll start with Living in Bondage. Signals, they brought in directing. For me, there were just two people, two outstanding performances for me that really like moved me. And I know everyone kept on saying this swanky JK was amazing, blah blah blah. He tried, but I'm not going to compare him to okay, let me be fair enough. Actually, it's like a two in one. To me, I just felt like he had great chemistry with Munachi. He had like this great on.
Have we lost Shazy?
Yeah, I can't hear her anymore. I thought it was just
Okay. Sorry, Shazy, we have lost you. Try going off and coming back on again, see if that works better. All right. Okay. But we will still move on. Still in the spirit of performances. Um, Atas, you want to tell us which film does better for you in terms of performances?
Sure. I thought there was someone else before me, but anyways, uh, so I think that the good thing about this pairing is that they both have like a star-studded cast and like powerhouses. So it doesn't really feel like one is outweighing the other. However, I do think Living in Bondage manages to have the better lead actor in Jide Kene, which is huge when you're battling Genevieve. But I feel either he was better directed or understood his role better and had a better time portraying it. Genevieve felt very one note a lot. And so does a lot of the acting in Lionheart. Even in Kim Owo seems to be playing sort of the same note the entire movie, whether things are going right, they're going wrong, or they're in jail. There are really no nuances, I think, in Lionheart, but we're focused on performance right now. So for me, I think Living in Bondage just gave me a lot more to work with, acting wise. Even Ramsey Noah's character um, was interesting. I think the weakest note for me was I know his name, the guy who plays the priest. Like I know his name very well, but it's not coming for me right now. But
Kenneth Okonkwo.
yes. So I think he was weaker in this movie. But in general, like Jide Kene manages to have better chemistry with like his family, his cousin, Genevieve's mom and dad. none of them ever really feel connected for me. So I'm gonna give it to Living in Bondage.
Ooh, 1-1. Okay, all right. It's getting interesting now. I don't. Well, I'm just going to leave it up to you guys to decide how you want to differentiate, because me, I've been thinking about my performances and how to do it, and sometimes the characters sneak in there to how I feel about the performances. But I'll leave it up to you. You can decide how you pass that difference. All right, Stephanie, do you want to tell us uh in terms of performances, which film does it better for you?
Honestly, I'm still not sure. This was actually my first time watching Living in Bondage. I had to watch Lionheart again. Uh, one thing I would say though, for a movie that's 2 hours plus long, I felt like I didn't we still spend enough time with the characters in Living in Bondage. Um, hmm, let's see. I think I will give this one to Lionheart just because for the short amount of time, I felt like they did better than Living in Bondage, where it had 2 hours runtime, and I still felt like I wasn't immersed in the characters enough to actually gauge their performances. Some characters just came in for a very short time. I don't know. It was star-studded, but I didn't feel like I spent enough time with them. I don't know if that's a very good reasoning, but just based on that alone, I'll give it to Lionheart.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Stephanie. Lionheart goes back to 1-up. Emmanuel, do you want to? By the way, if you're in the audience, you don't want to speak, feel free to tell us which one does best for you in terms of performances. Emmanuel, do you want to tell us which film does better for you in terms of performances?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rocco Critic. Please, am I audible first? Because I want to be very sure I'm
You're
audible.
audible.
Okay. Yes. Before now, when I even saw the movie, like when I saw the difference, the Lionheart versus Living in Bondage, I'm like, how, from where to where? But since it's like this, before now, I've seen Lionheart once, I've seen Living in Bondage. I think that's twice or three times now. So that's to tell you that Living in Bondage has it for me. The replay value, it's I got so immersed in the movie in terms of replay values. Like it's something that I can watch over and over again. I don't just know, but I feel what's the connection between this movie, the two, is just the culture. They are very big on culture, and you can see the Igbo language, the characters easing into the language very well. You get so. But for Living in Bondage, there's just this rawness in Living in Bondage, and you can see that from the character of Jidekene Achufusi, Sean Farquhar, even the I think that's Jide Kene's wife or girlfriend at the end of the day, later day. So she actually tried in that movie. So if I'm comparing this movie to Lionheart with characters like Inkem or Osofia, Peter Doce, Genevieve herself, like Lionheart, I didn't feel there's no verve there. Like I didn't feel that I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it. It didn't strike any chord in me. But for Living in Bondage, you can see from the beginning when the guy, I think that's the character, but I don't know the guy, this particular guy in that acted President Babagida's biopic. I don't know his name, but you can see. Yes, Eyinaya. Yes, Eyinaya. So from the beginning, where he butchered his daughters, slaughtered him. From the start of that movie, you can see how the movie was going. Then the horror started unfolding. So for me, I would say Living in Bondage. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that is it.
Thanks, Emmanuel. That's I appreciate that. I'm not sure whether you gave that one for your overall or that was performances, but we have put it down for performances. We'll still come back to you in case anything changes.
Yes, for performances
Okay,
actually.
okay.
For performances.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see whether Shozi can speak now. Shozi, try and keep it brief. You know your network does not like you. Just keep it short. Um, Shozi, so if you're there, you can try again.
Hi. God, MTN is always disgracing me. Sorry about that. Um, so like wait, let me confirm. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, hold on. Like I was saying, I started with living in bondage. I'm going to keep it cute and simple, right? To be honest, aside Munachi and Swanky's their on-screen chemistry, and then probably the switch between English and Igbo, yeah, they tried. It was really effortless. To be honest, it was just another occultic Nollywood movie for me. I mean, cinematography was great, but to be honest,
Oh, Shazi. Performances. We're going through stages.
the things I could use to judge the performances, like there was nothing. I don't have anything to say about living in bondage. To be honest, maybe I should speak on Lion's Heart because, like I said, living in bondage is just another Nigerian movie. There was really nothing much. So how did it and in terms of Kemo, and Peter Dochi for me. Yeah, I know they are Nollywood legends, but it just felt like a different movie as at that time it came out in Nigeria. Like it was big on family values, and we get to see for the first time the Igbo culture was celebrating a female child rather than the male
Shazi, I
child.
don't know whether
So,
you're concentrating on performances. We're just talking about the performances at this time. Is that what you have in mind? Because we're going to go through different categories. Uh, I yeah.
oh, I thought we talk about both movies,
We're talking
like
about both
our
movies,
thoughts
but
on.
we're starting with performances. We'll go through the story, and then we'll do production, and then
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So
Well, if you're talking about those performances, then for Lionsheart to me it was just Nkemo that really did it for me, to be honest. Nkemo, and then for Living in Bondage, it was just Swanky and Munachi for me, to be honest. That's just all I have to say if it's for performances, to be
so
honest.
which one do you prefer amongst the
Uh,
two performances?
to be honest, I prefer Nkemo over everyone's acting. I prefer Lion's Heart, to be
All
honest.
right. Okay. Lena Havens the acting for Shazi. All right. Okay. That's okay. Mrs. C, what
So, performances for Lionheart versus Living in Bondage. If we're going leads, JKA versus Jenny. I think Jenny was. I think Jenny's performance in Lionheart was just a little one note. But JKA wasn't good either. Peter Doce killed it. And Kim killed it. Which is 2. Sean Farquhar was good. A little bit of Ramsey was good. Parents in Living in Bondage were good. This is hard, but I'm gonna have to go with Living in Bondage. Because I think it did have some of the worst performances, but I think it also did have some of the better ones, while there was a bit of a flatness and lack of zhuzh in Lionheart. So I'll go Living in Bondage.
Okay. All right. Just in case, I know Mr. C might be copying me a little bit, but just in case that, let me put it out there. This is going to be a theme going forward. Is that I think living in bondage for performances and a lot of things has higher highs, lower lows than Lionheart. Lionheart, Lion, yeah. Lionheart's own is yeah. The thing about Lionheart for me is that it feels quite boring. Everybody feels a little asleep. It feels like there was aircon in the room for the most part. Inkem is the only one like that feels a little alive, but then it now makes him feel like he is from a different movie. And I don't I think the first time I watched the first few times I watched it, I was like, yeah, he's the one who's the, and I still agree, like he still feels, but he does feel out of place in the movie. But yes, Living in Bondage has some very cringe, from very, very cringe performances from Jide Kene and the earlier parts, Ramsey. So it's stuck in between. I might give this to Lionheart. Just I'm going to give this to Lionheart, but by the skin of its teeth, to be honest, because there is no real performance in Living in Bondage that's particularly outstanding, that has a decent amount anyway. Like I liked Bob. Actually, I liked a lot of the extras in Living in Bondage. I like Bob Manuel in there. There's a guy who plays, he's just one of the random business people who Jide Kene fight. I liked him in this. He has great comedic timing. And I liked Kana KOK in this as well. I actually like K&K in both, to be honest. So, but yeah.
Read my comments in the comment section about KOK being in both films.
There's not there's not a lot. Yeah. Oh, by the way, also Jide Kene is in both. Jide Kene is the person who is interviewing KOK on TV, but he has his back to us, so we don't see his face.
I only just thought Kalu Ikagu and KOK were the intersections, but Jide Kene as well. Okay.
Jide Kene is also in there, but yeah, you don't see his face, you just hear his voice, and I can hear that bad acting. Regardless, I don't need the face. It's very strong. All right, so but who did I give it to again? I gave it to Lionheart, right? I gave it to Lionheart by the skin of its teeth, really. All right, okay, so we're done with performances. It's just so uninteresting.
The scores for performances.
What's the score for performances?
It's 3-3 tied.
4-3 to Lionheart currently. Sorry, what was that?
Oh yeah.
All right, 4-3 to Lionheart on performances. All right, I was the decider. All right, so we're going to go to story, the big one, right, for a lot of people. Story, in terms of story, oh god, in terms of story, who are we picking? All right, Vanessa, you can lead us.
I'm glad that you said oh god, because if Nami talk and now it would be like say okay. Lionheart is quite a basic. Lionheart is quite a basic story. Largely universal. However, the execution is just as basic as the story. There's no nuance. It's literally like what's the sketch and colors? I mean, what's the saying that people do say when they say something?
Paint and numbers.
Paint by numbers only. Yeah, that's it. Lionheart is very paint by numbers. The characters are one-dimensional. There's, again, like I said, there's zero nuance. And so a bit underwhelming Lionheart story. Onto Living in Bondage. Granted, Living in Bondage did have source material upon which to draw from. I think what's gonna push me to the side of Living in Bondage over Lionheart in this category is because it did a mostly good job at expanding on the source material and bringing it into 2019. Did the reporter plot line go higgy haga? It definitely did. But but by and large, Chinikidna. God, Mr. C, don't downfire you. By and large, execution wise, it definitely executed the story better than Lionheart did, and that's why I'm giving it to Living in Bondage. Goodbye.
Oh wow, this struggle. All right, it's nice to see people who are a lot more sure of themselves, a little bit more a bit more unsure of themselves, he says. All
Because
right.
you're rude. This is such a bad thing to do.
Yeah. All right, Shazi, please tell us, in terms of story, which one you think did better for you? Which one worked better for you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So for me, it's already very clear. For storyline, Lions Heart did it for me. I don't know, it was just kind of refreshing as at the time that movie came out. Like, I personally I watch a lot of like Nollywood movies, you know. It was just refreshing to see that for once there was this, Igbo movie that celebrates the female child rather than the male, It just had this what do I say? Authentic indigenous kind of feeling, like no too much funny, grandiose lifestyle, accents, weaves flying all over the place, all those stuffs. It was just refreshing to me. Like, I mean, it's a movie that was big on family values, you know. I like the way they portray the Igbo and Hausa culture, and Nkemo will get to see him playing the good guy for once. Um Again, like I said, living in bondage to me, I've been watching Hollywood movies since I was like two. Living in bondage just felt like another occultic movie to me. I'm sorry, it didn't really. I don't know. There was no horror or anything for me. Oh. I don't know. It was just there. So I'm just going to give it to Lion's Heart. I feel like I should just even talk about Lion's Heart because whatever category you say today, it's just going to be Lion's Heart for me. That's just the truth. So yeah, that's my two piece.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Shazi. Stephanie, in terms of story, where are you leaning?
Um, Honestly, I'm leaning towards living in bondage, and my reasons are, I just prefer the story better. Lionheart, there's nothing remarkable about it, and for living in bondage, we've definitely seen movies like that before, but I felt like they had more to play with. Like they could have gone a million different directions with it. It just there was it had meat to it, I would say. I mean, let's not talk about how if they executed it right. But for the story, I was more intrigued by it. I was hoping to see more. I wanted to see more actually than I did for Lionheart. So for those reasons, I'll give it to Living in Bondage.
Okay, living in bondage takes it. Thanks, Stephanie. Um, who? Otas, yeah. Otas, have you? Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's gonna be Living in Bondage. So Lionheart has a decent story, mostly because it plays it really safe. Like you know how the story is going to end. It doesn't do too much from that path, which isn't the worst thing, except that when it does deviate from the path, it feels like it creates manufactures rather obstacles that don't feel natural. So a lot of what are supposed to be climaxes don't really feel earned or like climaxes. Um, and then the story itself, even while set in a very evil way, there's a lot of things in it that don't feel natural. For me, like starting from when Genevieve gives that speech when the Agueros are fighting, and it's supposed to be inspirational, but it just ends up feeling very stupid in the grand scheme of like anything you've ever known about Agueros ever. And so it just kind of starts from there with creating ridiculous obstacles that they have to surmount. Living in Bondage, while it's continuing another story, I think it manages to give it a spin in its own way, and it creates a movie that can stand on its own. Um, Story has issues, obviously, but it's interesting and definitely has a lot more. It takes a bigger, like a lot more chance. So Lionheart to me kind of feels like walking on a treadmill. You're not really going anywhere. Nothing interesting is gonna happen. While Living in Bondage feels like hiking. Like a mountain lion might attack you, maybe. I don't know, but it's fun. It's exciting. You're outside. There's fresh air.
All right. Thanks, Otas. Uh, fresh air. All right. Emmanuel, do you want to give us, in terms of story, which one do you prefer? Emmanuel, are you there? Okay, we might be missing Emmanuel. All right, Mrs. C, do you want to give us, in terms of story, which...
You know what's crazy is that at the time, I did think Lionheart's story was a breath of fresh air, just in terms of the premise. But there really was a nothingness to the execution. And I remember it really winding me up how we spend all this time going around, and it's supposed to be this thing of letting a daughter, right? Like a daughter running the company and standing in for her father. And it was nice to have the uncle that was not scheming to ruin things for her and was really supporting her and trying to get things through. But everything gets solved by her uncle. And all of a sudden, it didn't feel as feminist. He sorts out the issue with the, he fixes a thing for the other guy that they end up partnering with, which, brings them on their side. It was his idea to do the small buses. She just wasted their time going around in circles and finally settles on her uncle's idea, which, hey, young women, listen to your uncles. They have more life experience than you and they know what you're doing. They might indulge you while you end up in prison for a bit. But you know what? Listen to the older men around you. That's kind of what I felt like. Now, living in bondage, we've done this, right? We've done this before. There's literally a part 1, right? With Andy. And we brought Andy back. This living in bondage basically was part 3, right? So it's not by any chance a unique story. But it was more interesting. It was. It opening with that scene of Aina on his way to murder his daughter with the background music and just the creepy. That was way more exciting.
What? You're getting to a story. Stick on story.
No, but that's part of the story, right? That was the storytelling. They were telling this story, right? But anywho, yeah, it is too much talk. It goes to living in bondage.
Okay. Thanks, Mrs. C. Emmanuel, are you back? Do you want to tell us which story you prefer between Living in Bondage and Lionheart? Emmanuel, are you capable? Are you able? All right. Okay. Yeah. So for me, the answer is Living in Bondage. Quite clearly, I think most people have mentioned how sort of uninteresting the story, the general gist. It's just Vanessa said it right. Like it's both very pained by numbers, and Natas was right in terms of every time it sort of takes a deviation from it, it feels wayward. And the prison, when they go to prison, it's such a wild thing they do to get out of prison. They just swap some other, you need a man and a woman, right? We'll put a man and a woman in. I'm like, wait, what? And the guy allowed it. He said, my guy, we've been looking for one man and one woman. So we need to have one. But regardless of the pain by numbers and the weird tangents they go on, I hate the story it's trying to tell, because the story it's trying to tell is the story of a very entitled woman, young lady that honestly sometimes is a lot late to work, who has clearly has a lot to learn, but there is no humility in any of this thing. Maybe we want to say, oh, the arc is that she doesn't learn humility. I don't know, like this thing it's trying to sell you that it's about family something, and maybe it is about keeping the power in the family, which I don't care for that as a message, to be honest. Like, no, do you, right? And if I do have a family, I'm gonna keep it for me. But I guess it didn't help that Genevieve's character was so uninteresting, and I just didn't care to want her to succeed. The way they resolve the conflict is so you're owing 950 million. What are you going to do? Merger. Okay. What about the 950 million? Merger. What about the 950 million? What? What does this have to do with it? Because like what they're talking about is like how, or if they can gain capital, get smaller buses. Okay, what's in it? What's going to be in it for the people who are taking your 950 million debt? That's going to be the interesting part of the merging, right? Mm-hmm. What's in it for them, right? That's the part where it just never comes up in any of the business meetings that they're owing 950 million and they just need money because their father was very wasteful, was very bad with money. And they just do things, things just happen. The story of this, the story of this is, every time I watch it, I'm more appalled by the story of it. Even some things that some people say it's fresh, in terms of we're expecting the uncle to come in and just come in and take. Okay, you took a trope we've usually we have, and we obviously have that for good reason, by the way. It's found quite common and it's quite shocking and it's quite dramatic. But you took a trope we have and then you just didn't do that. You took the premise of a trope we have and then you just decided not to do that. And I should clap for you because of that. I don't know. Sometimes it wasn't clear whether it wanted to whitewash how patriarchal, like our old customs and culture could be, or whether it was just saying this family is different. It really wasn't clear on that. And anyway, you want to give it credit for doing that. Oh, but here we go. We're going to have Igbo scammers inside this movie, by the way. How is that for? I don't know. I don't care for this movie at all. Like there's the story of this movie is the most offensive part of it. So there was no way. Living in Bondage has many issues, by the way. It has many issues in the story, but nothing compared to just because like it's such a simple thing. It had such a simple thing to do, and it still messed it up. So yeah, for me, Living in Bondage wins story. All right. After that Sermon on the Mount, scores
on the door.
What are the scores for story in that one? Was it only Shozi who picked?
Yes.
Lionheart.
5-1 because we missed Emmanuel.
Okay.
5-1 to Living in Bondage.
5-1 on that. All right. So you guys picked. You guys are picking Living in Bondage on the story for that one. All right. Let's move to production. Production, whether it be cinematography, whether it be location, all those other like things, costumes, looks, color grading, if you care about any of that stuff. I feel for you. Vanessa.
You know what? In fact, it's good that you told me what you're expecting now, because even with the production, I was like, what does this man want me to say? And like, what does this entail? Because these categories are a bit broad. So again, the running theme here, guys, is that I'm stressed. I'm going to this time. You can't laugh. I'm going to start with what do they call it? Living in Bondage. I just want to start with the night scene. The opening scene of Living in Bondage. Was, it probably is still pretty much up there with my favorite Nollywood scenes shot at night. Again, I didn't used to care about things like this in 2019 until I met this man who has basically ruined my life. Yeah, I the way this scene was shot at night, fantastic. We could actually see what was going on, guys. Could you imagine? And it still looked like night. It didn't look like they were shining one bright light and it looked like daytime. Um, also, the way it was shot, that the way the driving. I know I'm focusing a lot on this opening scene, but guys, this opening scene carried the way it was shot with the focus on Aina's eyes, and then they go into the daughter as she's singing that nursery rhyme, and then they go again. It's genuinely a beautifully shot scene. The doll landing without it being overly gory. Loved it. Also, what is a child's of play film without a yacht on an open body of water in South Africa? Guys, I'm sorry. I know when we're doing that on popular opinions, I see people I miss child's of play. Bring back yachts on open bodies of water in South Africa. We need it back. I'm sorry. I loved it. But really, you are laughing. It's not funny. All of this goes into production. The production value of the initiation ceremony, another favorite of mine. This is what I mean by taking the source material and bringing it into 2019, which is where I don't agree with. Is it Shozi who says it just feels like any Nollywood ritual movie? It probably a bit copy of Hollywood occult films? Probably, but it was a very good choice in bringing what was a remake of an old film into 2019. The robes were robing. Um, the scene just felt well, and I quite liked the execution and the style of it. It being like a dreamscape, and so um, what's his face? Swanky's character didn't know that he had gone through the initiation until he woke up and he saw the star on his hand. I liked how that was executed as well. However, on the downside, the editing of the church fight scene between what's his face, Ramsey Noah and Kenneth Okonkwo, I didn't quite like that. On to Lionheart. The production of this is also kind of pretty solid. Oh, sorry, before I go on to Lionheart, aside from the robes robing in the execution scene, I didn't enjoy the costuming of this either. Except for the moments where they were in suits, the rest of it didn't feel like these were rich men, billionaires. Okay, moving on. But then again, Nollywood doesn't know how to dress billionaires. Sorry, I'm moving on to Lionheart now. The production of this is also kind of pretty solid. I guess camera quality very nice. Please, you should not come for me. I'm not speaking on cinematography because I don't have professional opinion on this. I haven't developed my opinion on cinematography well enough to make any standing statement. The setup of the feel of how a lot of the homes looked felt authentic in Lionheart. I quite enjoyed their family home. I don't know how I feel about the Meccano home. We didn't see a lot of it, but the bits we saw of the what is their son name again? The Lionheart family son name. I can't remember their son name again, and I just watched this film this morning. But their family home, it did feel authentic. The company, the setup of the company and the bus company, and I guess the outside garage also felt authentic. I hate Oluwa mi o. I hated the God. I I'm trying to see if I can soften how I'm feeling about the costumes in Lionheart, but I can't. Yeah, I hated the costumes in Lionheart, guys. I'm sorry. Genevieve Naji's pencil dresses upset my soul. I also really hate the blue and green color palette that they gave her for those dresses. I didn't like it. I also didn't like the way her assistant Onyinye was dressed. The hair, okay, but yeah, it wasn't giving, guys. The costuming wasn't great in this, and you know I care about costuming. The costuming in both films wasn't good either. So, I guess what I'm saying, Jehovah, I guess what I'm saying is Lionheart is taking. I'm sorry, no, scratch that. Living in Bondage is taking this. Oh God.
The funny thing, you was here though. As soon as she finished talking, she mute herself. Like, okay. All right, okay, all right, okay. So, Living in Bondage has drawn first blood on production. All right. So, Shozi, for you, which one? Which in terms of production, which one do you prefer? It shows that you. Oh yeah, you forgot
Yeah,
to have
I'm
small.
here. Yeah. In terms of production, I mean, Lionheart was shot in Enugu and I think Kano. Yeah, I think Kano State. Yeah. The cinematography and locations, they were very, very like brilliant for me. I liked the camera angles. Maybe because I'm biased for what's it called, living in bondage. I didn't really like focus on that aspect in living in bondage because like I said to me from watching movies since I was like two, it just looked like an occultic. Yeah, the storyline might have been different, but it's still like the usual like occultic Nollywood movies to me. So in all honesty, I'm going to be very honest. I didn't really focus on, that aspect in living in bondage, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Shazi. I think we can guess where you're going to be leaning throughout now, like you have said. But thanks. After all of this, maybe just before our overall, we'll have a. I don't even know whether there's any point for a pushback section. We'll just don't worry. We'll just ride on. Atas, please.
So once again, living in bondage, like Vanessa, production is not my strong suit. But I did think living in bondage had a lot more interesting things to look at. I like the colors in living in bondage better. Um, and frankly, the opening scene alone does surpass really anything Lionheart does the entire movie. Overall, I liked more of the outfits in this. They felt a lot more in line with the story. Living in bondage does give you a lot of bad outfits, but also like a lot of good ones, a lot of fun ones. Um, Lionheart's education of like even the fashion and styling also felt one note for all the characters. It doesn't really seem. It just feels like they had an idea, business lady, so they gave her business lady outfits. It just was all of it just felt very one.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Atas. Stephanie, any feelings as where you're leaning in production?
So when you say production, can you clarify on what I'm supposed to like judge it
Yeah,
on?
so I would say costumes, I would say cinematography, I would say production design, like the sets, what locations look like, how they felt to you, maybe the color grading, just
Mm-hmm.
it's just the general look of the film and the feel for you.
Okay. Going on that, I'll give it to Living in Bondage because there was just a lot more to look at. It felt, I would say, more authentic for what they call it. What's the other one? Oh my god. Lionheart. It felt a little bare at times. I don't know, it just felt really bare. And for costuming, honestly, I would want to give it to Lionheart just because I hate in living in bondage, especially for the women, the hair, the bad wigs, and the clothes. That one really irks me, but still, I feel like they put in more effort in living in bondage than they did in Lionheart. Let's see, cinematography. I'll give it to Living in Bondage still. There was just a lot more interesting things to look at. The set design. Um, oh, there was this scene where what's his name? The pastor was in the church and they were having like a choir practice. I just felt like that was a really nice touch to add to that scene. It felt real. As someone that's also been in the choir too, so I like that scene. So just yeah, in terms of everything, I'll give it to Living in Bondage.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Uh, we'll try again with Emmanuel. Emmanuel, are you back? Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, so sorry. It's glow. It's glow. So I've caused glow actually. They did me dirty. They did me shaggy. But thank God I'm back. So the thing is, I already gave a hint from the beginning that the opening scene where Iyinaya murdered the daughter. So that gave me a good feel, like starting easing into the movie itself. So that's a beautiful one. For production, in terms of sound, cinematography, visual effects, location, and design. For sound, I would give it to Living in Bondage. In fact, most of the things I ticked on my list here goes to Living in Bondage, because in terms of sound, if you notice that church where Ramsey Noah entered the church and the way the door closed in on each other, like you could feel the sound effect from that door, the church building. Yes, you could feel the sound effect. Then moving on to location and design, you see the old brown roof. I think it was shot in Enugu State as well. You see the old brown roof where Jide Kene visited. When he went home from Lagos, he had to visit his brother Sean Parkwa and the parents to his uncle. So you will see that you see the lifestyle. It's giving you that feeling of that feeling like, okay, you're going to the village for the first time, or you're visiting village, and the aura and everything. That's the beauty. It's giving you that feeling on that note, location and design. When it comes to costume, well, costume, I won't really give it like 10 over 10 on costume. Neither will I give it 10 over 10 costume on Lionheart. I just felt that they were just there, nothing much, nothing to blow me off. You get. For cinematography, they did well. They tried. The filmmaking was not. It had glitches though. Yes, it had glitches, but I would still pick Living in Bondage over Lionheart. Lionheart, what I would say about Lionheart is just the color. It was pleasing to the eyes. Just nothing much about Lionheart. The color was just pleasing to the eyes. Like, I was say, okay, this is what they're doing. The color, they tried to when it comes to location and design. I think they tried in Lionheart, but on my list, I would give it to Living in Bondage in terms of production.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Emmanuel. Mrs. C.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be Living in Bondage. Not too much talk on that. Although I have to say, whoever put Ina's character, his second wedding was his second marriage when he was marrying Sha. The costuming for that wedding was quite poor. Whoever put his bride in that outfit, even for 2018, the wife of you are marrying a rich man, a man that wealthy, absolutely no way in hell that was what she wore. Everybody's gilly in that scene. Whoever tied everybody's gilly in that scene should be flogged. Everybody's gilly was bad. Nancy's blouse was bad. The love interest did not dress like she was going for trad. It was skirt and blouse like she was going to the office. That scene in particular, it was just bad. Like the all-white party looked fancier than a millionaire's wedding, than Chief Omego's son's wedding. Granted, it's his second marriage and he has sacrificed his first wife and child. But still, go big or go home. Andy's second wedding was bigger than this. But I will still give it to Living in Bondage. Oh my God. When I saw, I think we said Ramsey's house is like the final boss of a rich Igbo man's house. It was gold and shiny and gold everywhere. It was such a character and I kind of loved it. And honestly, yeah, I do prefer Living in Bondage. Production-wise.
All right. Okay. So Living in Bondage has some really bad like CG, some bad green screen in there. I'm remembering Ramsey with a cigar in that was it a Porsche? Was it a Porsche or a Ferrari? I don't
We
know
don't
what it
speak
was.
about that Ferrari scene. We don't speak
Oh
about
my
it, please.
God. It
Yeah.
was awful green screen. I remember that standing out at the time. I'm watching it again. It was, yes. Living in Bondage has, and then there's some CG with the black smoke when they're doing some sacrifice. There's some things that, but it's ambitious and it's difficult to judge both of these things because Living in Bondage is really trying to be ambitious with its production. And like many people have spoken about, there's just more things to keep you occupied. However, I do think though that with its ambition, it is able to again hit higher highs, even though it does hit lower lows as well. I say that though, and the color grading in Lionheart, I know a lot of people like it, but it's still very bad to me. It's just I can't believe that's the finished product. Somebody needed to go. just a little too green. We can turn it down a little bit. Just the whole place. I still think even though they don't, they have different ambitions. And clearly very different budgets. I just think the tone they were going for in Lionheart, the office scene that's not the way you should light it. Like it felt like the throne of King of Boys, where we're about to do some really shady business. It was too dark. Of what you can see, the walls, it's again still too dark. Everything just looks like this is where, I don't know, you're supposed to be doing very shady business. The lighting in there is a little harsh. Yeah, and it just took me out. So it's that office where they have all the board meetings and all of that. I think that's especially bad. I don't like the color grading, and for me, Vanessa's right in terms of that opening scene. It's almost like a little short. That could almost stand up on its own in terms of like if you're submitting a shot. That's for me one of the best opening scenes Nollywood has done still. It's up there for me with King of Boys. And funny enough, both of them have almost as this one, Living in Bondage one has slightly more relevance to as how the film continues. So I give it that. But yeah, there's still some things Living in Bondage doesn't do as well. To be honest, Living in Bondage has a lot of drone shots, a lot. They are all actual establishing shots though. It does feel a little lazy after a while, but it also kind of feels like this is what we're going for. So not so much. It depends on the day, to be honest, for me on this one. It can feel like, oh, this is how this film is playing itself. It's doing drone shots for establishing shots. So that's okay. It's something you can just take on board. But sometimes we want to skip a scene. It's not like we want to skip a scene. It's like, oh, we need to do a drone shot of the sky, of the cityscape. All right, we've seen it. Okay, next scene. Even though like we've moved from the same office to the office next door or something like that. But yeah, for this, for me, it has too many highs. That I also remember the car bashing and how the cinematography transformed that from like night to day, and that transition. That's one of my favorite transitions in Nollywood. I like that as well. So there's a lot of nice things. A lot of people talk about the chemistry between Jide Kenez and whatever his love interest in this. And
hey, wait, so no, whatever. That is MB, former most beautiful girl in Nigeria, Munachi Abi. Let's not do that.
Yes. Did she also do music at some point? Did she do
yes,
music?
She did. She was a rapper. Not too much of my girl.
Okay, yeah. I remember.
It was given a beautiful face card.
She's very well cast, and she fitted well with that. But I think one of the things that makes that role work, that chemistry sort of work, is the way it was shot. It wasn't over the head where you're saying we cut to this person's face, we cut to that person's face. It was this show. What is it called? I recently watched a video on this, but you can see both of them talking to each other at the same time, and it just feels so. There's no trick in terms of there weren't too many anyway. There were a couple, but like it starts off very far and it zooms in closely, and they're just talking and just talking. It starts awkward and it gets much more comfortable before he carries on his G-Wagon. Great. But anyway, I just, there's so much more to like about the cinematography, and it doesn't always have to do with the budget. So yeah, for me, the production in Living in Bondage wins that one easy. So we are coming to the climax.
Hold on. Scores on the door.
Oh, scores on the production. I think is this similar as story?
6-1, yeah.
6-1. All right. Okay. Let's go to overall best.
Overall.
What do you think the overall best one? Now, given we have your scores, if you're weighing one way, we can see it. But it doesn't matter because maybe sometimes this one just pass one it with small, and the other ones one it with big, and whatever. Just give us your overall best as you are feeling it, Vanessa.
I for all three categories, I wrote notes as I was watching the film, right? The films. I didn't write notes for overall best because, to be honest, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm choosing. Yeah, I hmm. well, based on my new findings and my new eyes and having watched both films, I will say, hey, Chineke, nah. Living in bondage, definitely. They don't laugh at me. It's not funny. You will understand. I quite. It's not funny. You people should stop this thing that people are doing, because when in 2018, when this film came out, I remember I opened my Netflix for my mommy and I to watch Lionheart. Sorry, when Lionheart came out in 2018, we sat down, we watched it, we were having a great time. When Peter Doce said your continued stay is an extension of your irrelevance, could you leave, please? We both reacted. Was quite a lovely time. Had I known, it's not funny. Had I known that a few years later I would be conscripted into a coven of badly behaved people who have now, who have now made me by force grow my movie watching abilities and change how I see things. Yeah, all this rigmarole that I'm going through is basically to say overall best. I think despite Jide Kene's below par acting and all of that, living in bondage takes it. Oh God.
Oh, the pain. Oh, wow.
Touch
The pain.
touch it.
I can't say I didn't enjoy that. All right.
Of course you
Um,
will enjoy it.
I can't say I did. I can't say I didn't. I can't say I. Okay, I can. All right. Um. Uh. Who? Shozi, do you want to tell us your overall best? Surprise us. Do a twist. Please give us your overall best.
For me, guys, I really don't know what to say much. I don't know. I really don't know. To be honest, when Living in Bondage came out and I watched it, I wasn't really a fan. So it just feels like I should come on a space that talks about Lion's Heart. To be honest, I don't really know what to say in summary, but Lion's Heart does it for me because I didn't really feel anything about Living in Bondage. It was just another occultic Nollywood movie for me. Yes, they were great. I mean, it was my first time of seeing JK, to be honest, and it's not like it was bad. I'm just saying I'm not going to choose it over Lion's Heart, and I think I gave a few of my reasons why I would not choose it over Lion's Heart. Lion's Heart just did it for me at that point. It was a big deal. I mean, prior to the Nollywood movies we were having that time, and the Lions are just came. I feel like it kind of like brought something different. Overall, for me, it's going to be Lion's Heart. To be honest, I can't choose Living in Bondage over it. That's just my personal opinion.
All right. Thanks, Shozi. A task. Do you want to give us your overall best?
Yeah, so I am very, very torn, but I think I'm leaning slightly towards Lionheart, just slightly. I think that Lionheart holds a lot more of its rewatch value, and it was a little more timeless, I think, than Living in Bondage. Um, so for me, like when I watched Living in Bondage at first, I enjoyed it. It was fun, but then if it was a seven for me, it feels now more like a four, because it's really lacking in the plot of the story. And while Lionheart was always pretty average for me, so if it was a five, then it still feels like a five. Um, Living in Bondage establishes a lot more chemistry between its characters and Lionheart, which makes the character's journey more impactful during the movie somewhat, but also more incomplete as it winds down and just leaves you wanting a lot more. Like man, living in bondage is in general more interesting, but it achieves that by doing a lot of spectacle and not as much substance as I would have liked. Uh, but I just had a much harder time rewatching Living in Bondage. It had good individual scenes, but it felt a lot less cohesive as a movie. Lion Watch was an easier rewatch. It was also shorter and gets to the point quicker, and at least follows the rules that it has set up in the world that it's established. Um, yeah, and I didn't really like either main character. Like when it comes to entitlement, they're both quite entitled. You know, he leaves his job and tries to steal their a big client as his opening scene, no contract, just vibes. You know, Genevieve wants to run the company just because she's the MD's daughter and doesn't really have any good ideas of her own. I wasn't really fond of either of them primarily. So living in bondage does have higher highs and lower lows, but that also means it feels like a roller coaster. And after a while, you start to get nauseous. So I guess Lionheart for being easier to rewatch. There is something to be said for like, you know, a slow, steady journey than like a tumultuous one. So
Whoa, somebody says they don't like roller coasters. Just come out and say you're boring. Just come out and be boring. All right. You know what? It's funny because Otas actually it was a clean sweep for Otas up until now for living in bondage. Clean sweep, but right at the end, it seems like Lionheart has stolen it. I will say, because we don't have a pushback section, with regards to both of the leads being entitled, at least one is supposed to be entitled. It is part of his character and part of why he does.
And he actually works. So sorry.
Yeah.
When he did get the clients, he actually did put in the work.
Yeah, he's a hustler. Yeah. He's just a hustler. His eye is too big. That was his thing. Right? His eye was always bigger than his. They say it to him at some point. They say it to him a couple of
but that
times.
does not mean that he's stupid. He just came up a little dull to me. Like it felt like he just kept doing things without really thinking about them. Yes, he may have been good at his job, but I guess some people are better employees. He just wasn't very smart.
Yeah. Fair. Not that I would say Lionheart's lead was at all smart.
No, she wasn't either.
All right. Thanks, Otas. Stephanie, do you want to give us your overall best?
This is such a hard decision. Do we have to?
Has Stephanie also given a clean? Oh, sorry, Stephanie. I was speaking to Mrs. C. I thought I was on mute. I was about to ask. Okay. Okay, sorry, Stephanie, go on.
Okay, I was saying this is a hard decision to make. I feel weird giving putting one above the other because they're both like mid, but if it must be done, I think I'll go with Lionheart for this one. Okay, story-wise, like I already said before, story-wise, Living in Bondage was better, performances and other things. I'll give it to Living in Bondage, but I feel like if you're going to aim high, you should deliver rather than just letting everyone down. And that's what I feel Living in Bondage did. Like Ota said, I would really watch Lionheart again. I don't know if I would want to watch Living in Bondage again because it just promised a lot and did not deliver. Just for that alone, I feel like going forward, please, if you're going to aim that high, please deliver. I don't know. Lionheart is safe, very, very safe, but I think in this moment that works for it, so I'll give it to Lionheart.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. Speaking of aiming high, one of those movies tried to submit themselves for the Oscars. Just say it was not Living in Bondage. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, so Emmanuel, do you want to give us your overall best?
Yeah, well, I haven't heard from everyone. The twist is just crazy. I'm like, from where to where? Nibo, Sibo, like, don't you guys were with LIB? Why did you do that? The overall now is not Lionheart. But I stand undefeated. I still remain. I'm still going to. I stick with. I'm still with living in bondage. You get. So nothing will move me. I refuse to fall out of that line. I'm still with living in bondage because if you look at Lionheart, like what I said earlier, living in bondage has, for me, it has its replay value, something that I can watch over and over and over again. But Lionheart, I don't see anything intriguing there that will just hold me like spellbound. Okay, go and see the movie again. Like there is nothing. Although yes, it had a good storyline. Okay, they were approaching somewhere, but it's just there. No verve, it's not the Mwangi and the old spice. Everything is just it's lacks in terms of spice. So you're going this way, then going another way. No, no. But living in bondage from the beginning, where the car was just alone in the middle of a forest like that, giving that, the feeling it gets you from the beginning. So I would give it to living in bondage. For me, it's living in bondage overall.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Emmanuel. Somebody who has stuck to his gun. Obviously, I'm an impartial judge. All right. Mrs. C.
It's gonna have to be living in bondage for me. Sorry to Lionheart. I really had quite an easy time rewatching Living in Bondage, even with all of the problems and all its faults. And I'm like, you know what? I get why Charles was salty that people did not. And people did not give this film more money. And he was like, fuck you guys, I'm gonna give you Rattlesnake. And glamour girls, like, oh my god, it really punished us, yeah. But yeah, it's gonna have to be Living in Bondage. I had a better time with this.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, no twist for me. It's really that I think Lionheart fails as much as Living in Bondage without even trying. As in the story wise, which is for me the meat of everything, without even trying as going as ambitious as Living in Bondage did. Living in Bondage at least had different aspects to it, different people's different characters they were trying to juggle and all of that. So I don't know what Lionheart's excuse is. It doesn't have any. It's funny. The first time I've watched it, I think I found it mainly boring and uninspiring. And then the second time I watch it, I've been finding it every time I watch it, it just keeps getting worse. By 2050, it might be in one of the worst films of all time list. At this rate, I'm not saying it is. I do think though on my recent watch, I don't know whether I've been gaslit into thinking I said Genevieve's. I don't know whether if I've previously said Genevieve's performance was awful. I don't think I have. Hopefully, I've said like something more nuanced, like little one note or wooden at times. It's not bad throughout. It's not as bad as I thought it was. Sha, watching in this one, it's still not good. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, there's something about somebody who really knows how to act, not doing very well versus somebody like Swanky who. Anyway, less said about that, the better. But yeah, for me, Higher Highs from Living in Bondage, that opening scene alone really better than anything in Lionheart. So yeah, we don't have to do scores. If we're counting it though, I'm sure the scores will reach something like what 4-3. 4-3. Yeah, but who's counting? Nobody's counting. Shows it. Is it your hand is up? Is there something you wanted to say? All right. If nothing more to add, but yeah, this was interesting for me. This was fun for me. I don't know. It sounded like some people found this very difficult, which is interesting. That was hopefully the point of this. I didn't want to give two uneven films, but it was interesting to watch people discuss it. Atas, is there something you want to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say it was difficult because they're not both neither of these movies are great movies necessarily, but I think that Living in Bondage benefited a lot from its predecessor and the fact that it had that source material to build on, which is why it's able to take the risks that it takes, which for me makes the failures feel a lot more because you literally had a cheat sheet.
I hear you on that, but
they also had Neck and Rattle and Glamour Girl.
If you look at all the other things that have been standing on the shoulders of, they haven't done pretty well. And actually, having a predecessor can be a double-edged sword. It can both be like what you said. It can be a sort of good, easier source of inspiration for something that has already worked, or you can have the burden of having to live up to the original source material and all of that. But yeah, I don't know. I still think what feels more offensive to me is that Lionheart didn't really try that, wasn't ambitious really, and I still think it couldn't pass the smell test for me. It still failed, and that's kind of sad. At least try. But yeah, that's generally just for me. Sorry for all the people who found this difficult, but I found this fun. Hopefully you guys in the audience have enjoyed something from this. Thanks for joining Nollywood Film Club, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed listening and would like to join live, just follow us on Twitter at Iroko Critic and join us every Sunday, 6 p.m. West African time on our spaces.